Hi, everybody. So in this video, I just wanted to point out a couple resources and give a couple of examples based on some of the areas that I noticed on planners that I feel like people were sort of just generally as a class, actually in all of my classes, kind of struggling with. So the first thing I just want to remind everyone is about summaries, because you will be writing a summary of the article that is the focus of your critical thinking, your critical evaluation paper. So just don't forget that when you're doing the summary portion, particularly when you're adapting from the planner, that you still want to follow all the rules of writing a summary. You want to begin your sentence with that introductory sentence that has the name of the author, the text being summarized, relevant context, the author's full name, and then the main idea. That's what the first sentence should entail in a summary always. And don't forget to put attributive tags throughout. Additionally, one of the things that I want to talk about with summary is picking out the major points. So I noticed in the planner that a lot of people were kind of just making like bullet points of things that they found like maybe interesting in the article. But I do want you to remember that when you're writing a summary, you're pulling out all of the major ideas. So one of the things that you want to do when you're creating the summary is you want to avoid anything that's too specific. You also want to work on paraphrasing quotes into your own language, into your own words. So I have an example in this Word document that I created of some of the specific details you might want to avoid. So if you look back at your own planner at maybe the bullet points that you were thinking of including before you turn your bullet points from the planner part one into an actual summary. Ask yourself if you need to take the information you pulled out and make it a little bit more generalized and more of a major point, because this is an example of a specific detail. You don't want to include specific statistics in your summary. Instead, you want to take the meaning out of them, figure out why that was included, and turn it into a major detail. So this is an example of a specific detail, a statistic that is probably too specific, too in-depth to include in your summary. And here's how you could extrapolate it into a sentence that is more appropriate for a summary. Because the real reason you're including this information here, why you're saying 50% of students are not getting enough sleep, which can cause problems concentrating, 30% do not have a healthy diet. The reason you would include a quote like this is so that you could pull out the major information that you think the author's trying to tell you, which is that students are not getting enough sleep and nutritious food, and that can impact their ability to learn. So you can see the difference. Instead of including the specific numbers, extrapolate, summarize, give a general version of why that information is such a major detail. And then here, instead of including a quote like exercise is really important for brain function and for having a positive attitude, in your summary, again, you would want this to be, cited. This is made up, so I can do this. All of this is made up. I just made this stuff up. Instead of including something like this, where you have a direct quote, that takes up a lot of real estate in a summary. A direct quote takes up so much space in an area where you don't have a lot of space to explain all of the major points of an entire article. So if it really is an important thing that you want to pull from the article, pull out the idea and explain a general version of why that idea is a major detail. And you can see the example is Hunt explains the importance of exercise and having a healthy brain and positive attitude. The reason that this quote is included is because it explains a larger piece of the argument. So that's something I want you to keep in mind with summary, because a lot of people had like 3 or 4 bullet points that would include like a statistic or a quote. Make sure that you're generalizing and putting into your own words as you paraphrase in your summary the reasons why these things are important instead of just quoting or pulling specific statistics. The other thing that I wanted to look at is just a reminder, and if you would like this article, this the writing summaries article, we actually covered it in Unit 3. So it's located in the table of contents, Unit 3 summary and response writing, Unit 3 learning materials. And there, if you look at it, you will also find summary writing tips if you would like that, as well as citing quotations and paraphrasing. So you're totally allowed to backtrack and check out these sources. I think that there might be another one on thesis writing in Unit 1. We can go check it out. But if not, I do want to talk a little bit about here we go. Yeah, thesis statements. This is an article about thesis statements. A thesis statement, in simple terms, is a summary of an academic paper. So in the article that you're currently working with, or rather in the assignment that you're currently working with the article, Is School Too Shallow? You are answering a specific question. So I'm noticing with a lot of thesis statements that I see a lot of informative thesis statements. I see some ideological response thesis statements. That is not the thesis statement that you want to be including in this paper. In this paper, you are answering the question, is this article effective or not, based on all of the work that you did in the planner. So if you go through and you evaluate the planner and you say, here's a great piece of evidence, all of the evidence I found was logos, which is logic. The author had a neutral tone. The author only included one logical fallacy. The counter argument wasn't that strong. All of these pieces you put together to form your estimation of whether or not the article by Belkin was effective or not. And that is a question you should be answering in your thesis statement. So if I ask you, was the article effective, and you tell me students are not being taught critical thinking across United States schools, that is not an answer to the question, is this article effective? If I ask you, is school too shallow, is many critical, or the name of the article is many colleges fail to improve critical thinking skills. Yeah, there we go. Sorry if I said is school too shallow earlier, that's my bad. I'm getting them mixed up in my brain. You're dealing with the article by Belkin, many colleges fail to improve critical thinking skills. If I ask you the question, is that article effective? And you say, I agree students are not being taught critical thinking across US schools, we're not having the same conversation. This is an appropriate response, an appropriate thesis statement for the last paper we did, the summary response, which was a response paper. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like it? Do you not? We're no longer doing that. The focus of our paper in Unit 4 is explaining whether or not it's well written, whether or not you like it. The focus of this essay is explaining whether or not it's well done. Does the person who's writing it have enough authority to be writing it? Are there counter arguments that could completely override it? Were you convinced by the information that was included? That's the kind of thing you want to talk about. So if your thesis statement looks like this, or you got feedback, which you should be checking, you got feedback that said this is more like an ideological response thesis, or you got feedback that said that this is more informative, replace it with something like this. Despite a little bias on his part against private schools, Carl's convincing sources and strong ethos appeal made his article effective and more convincing than the counter-argument. Again, this is made up. There is no Carl article, but this is the kind of language I want you to use. Despite a little bias on his part against private schools, Carl's convincing sources and strong ethos appeal made his article effective. When you see those are things that I took specifically from my planner. I went through my planner and I was like, oh, okay, I really like this part about how he has, convincing sources from these 3 different professors. I like that he is a professor himself, so he has strong ethos, and I don't think that the database article I found is more convincing than his. There's a little bit of bias here, and that is a problem, but I don't think that that bias is enough to make this article ineffective. That is the kind of thesis statement you want to write. You can see that is also carried out in something like, let me just open it up, the essay sample, which in a different video, I'm going to go over and explain why this is a good model to use. But you can see right here, her argument is effective because she uses a variety of strong evidence and convincing language, and her credibility supports the argument. These are the types of theses that you want to write for this evaluation, because you want to put forward and answer the question, is this article effective? And include some of the reasons why or why not.